Poor Conifer Swamps by Logan Sammet. So where are poor conifer swamps located? Poor conifer swamps are spread throughout the state of Michigan, but they're more common in the Upper Peninsula and the northern half of the Lower Peninsula, as it's shown on the map here. Some abiotic factors that are found in poor conifer swamps. There's soil, which allows the growth of vegetation and supports the growth and regeneration that is adapted to grow in its high acidity. There's also rocks, which are weathered and eroded and affects the nutrients in the soil. There's also water, which is drank by animals to keep them alive. Rain also happens in poor conifer swamps, which causes erosion to rocks and removes particles in the air. Air is also present and is breathed by animals to keep them alive. What does the habitat provide for animals and humans? Well, trees are used for animals to use as shelter and for humans to salvage and use for construction and fire. Water is used for animals and humans to drink and for humans to salvage and use for hydropower. Berries are also eaten by animals and humans. Leaves are just eaten by animals, and so are twigs. Some plants that are found in poor conifer swamps. One plant that's found here are pink lady slippers, which are a producer. It's a pink flower that's in the top left picture. There are also blueberries, which are also a producer that's in the top right picture. There are also bushes of wintergreen, which is in the bottom picture, and they are producers as well. There are also a few reptiles that are found in poor conifer swamps. One of them is a wood turtle, which is shown in the top picture, which is a secondary consumer because it eats insects. There's also the eastern Massasauga, which is a type of rattlesnake that's in the bottom picture, which is also a secondary consumer. There are quite a few mammals found in poor conifer swamps too. One mammal found here are moose, which are primary consumers because they eat plants. Another are gray wolves, which are tertiary consumers. There are also beavers, which are primary consumers. There are also lots of birds found in poor conifer swamps. One of them found here is a great blue heron, which is a tertiary consumer because it eats other animals such as birds and even snakes. There are also black-backed woodpeckers, which are secondary consumers. There are a wide variety of insects found in poor conifer swamps too. Large sawflies can be found here, and they are primary consumers. There are also spruce budworms, which are also primary consumers. There are a lot of ways that the species that live in poor conifer swamps interact with one another. Moose eat the twigs and leaves of trees. Turtles eat plants and insects. Birds also eat insects, and wolves hunt moose calves and beaver. There is a sort of food chain that happens in poor conifer swamps. It starts with the producer, which in this food chain shown here is paper birch. Then the consumers eat the producers. The consumer shown here is a large sawfly. They eat the leaves off of paper birch trees. Then the secondary consumer, which as shown here is an eastern Massasauga, eats the consumer. And then finally the tertiary consumer, the great blue heron, eats the snake, and then it's the top of the food chain. Eventually, the secondary consumer will die and decompose, which will fertilize the soil and help to grow more producers, which starts the food chain over. There are a few invasive species found in poor conifer swamps. One of them is glossy buckthorn, which leaves out early in the spring and retains its leaves late into fall, which shades out native plants and can be harmful to their growth. Another is reed canary grass. Its numerous stems can collect debris such as silt, which dries up the habitat, which wouldn't be good also for the much vegetation that's found here. The historical data I found for a population are the moose. In Michigan, the population grew from about 130 moose in 1997 to over 430 in 2011. Moose abundance is relatively low in Michigan, and there are not a lot of them. They're currently only found in a few areas in the Upper Peninsula. There are a few threats to the species and habitat overall of the poor conifer swamp. The low population of animals is caused by the low productivity of shrubs that grow edible substances, such as blueberries, and most of the vegetation that is grown here is either inedible or even poisonous. The soil is also highly acidic, and insect defoliation can be a problem as well. So there are a few possible traits that could be necessary for surviving in a poor conifer swamp. You would need some way to keep warm, such as fur. Wolves and moose both have fur to keep warm when it gets cold. Being colored to blend into the environment is also a very important trait, so you could hide from predators, or to hide from prey and sneak up on them. Being able to obtain food and water easily is another very important one, since without food and water you'd surely die. Being able to eat poisonous plants and berries may also be a necessary one to survive here. Some of the birds that live in poor conifer swamps are able to eat poisonous berries. Being able to reproduce so the species doesn't die out is also an important one, so the species doesn't die out. There are some biodiversity management considerations. According to Michigan State University, at their website, this information can be found as well. The best management strategy is to leave large portions of the swamps unharvested and allow natural processes such as fire, beaver flooding, and insect defoliation to operate unhindered and generate a range of successful stages. It's very important to allow dead wood to remain to become snags, stumps, and fallen logs. Within areas managed for biodiversity, resource practitioners should also refrain from salvage log harvesting following fire to prevent diminishing nutrient pools and site productivity. Controlled efforts to detect and remove invasive species before they become widespread are critical to preserving the biodiversity of poor conifer swamps. There are no fish or amphibians that live in poor conifer swamps due to the high acidity of the water. There has not been any arachnid species identified in poor conifer swamps either. These are my sources, and this is the end of my presentation.